Hello Mixtresses and Mixters. This is Mixtress Ray. You're watching Mixtress video. So, I'm not sure. I feel like I start every video with, I don't know what I'm going to say right now, but here we go. So that's it. I don't know what I'm going to say right now, so here we go. Okay. The thing that I'm like always dealing with is my relationship to objects. Always. And I've always been this way to a certain extent. I mean, I'll personally never know like how much of my relationship to objects is just straight up consumerist capitalist society materialism versus I feel like I have an actual spiritual connection to objects. And I would be willing to bet that most people that might be attracted to watching this video or attracted to watching my channel in general might also have that kind of relationship to objects. So how do you reconcile? I mean, if the type of thing, and in my case, and possibly in yours as well, if the type of thing that we are addicted to collecting is tarot decks, and we feel that there's some kind of spirituality involved in using tarot, which I do, then, you know, where does materialism end and spiritual connection to objects begin? I think they're pretty unmeshed. I think that they overlap because, you know, we all grew up in this same society. We tend to define ourselves by the things that we have. And there's good aspects and bad aspects to that, right? Figure out how I'm doing this. Again, I'm just using a tarot deck as a visual while I'm babbling. So, okay. So, as an example of like how I've always been this way, in my wallet right now, I have a library card. This library card is the exact library card that was issued to me at the age of, I think I was 9 or 10, because I believe it was 1992, so most of that year I would have been 9. So I got my very first library card at the age of 9. It is still in my wallet with my 9-year-old signature on the back and everything. And I'm very attached to that. I'm very attached to any time in my life that I have created a connection to a specific object and nurtured and maintained and cared for that connection. So that's directly why I am a person that has to keep my collection of items small, because that's the way that I am with everything. I'm extremely mindful about, and basically using the word mindful makes it sound like, you know, I think I'm cool for being this way. I do take pride in caring for the objects that I have in my life. But there's a certain amount of privilege in that as well, right? Like, the fact that I still have my original library card is incredibly privileged. I could have lost it in the tornado, but my purse did not get blown away. I could have lost it for other reasons. I could be a person that got moved around a lot as a child, and, you know, it wouldn't matter if I still had that same card because I don't live in that place anymore. But I work at the library where I got my very first library card. So I'm able to, and it's a way of me reconciling how my life has gone as well, because that's how it's gone that's the kind of values that I was brought up with. My family is that way, being, kind of working class, and not really having the resources to travel, or because I know people that grew up with more financial resources than me, that like they don't really care about their stuff. They sometimes when they're moving, they will just get rid of everything and buy all new stuff at the new location. And that is perplexing to me. I have definitely had times in my life where I've felt that I am superior to that type of person. And it's just an us and them mentality that doesn't need to exist. But, there's so many things in life that like you are the way you are, and you can't separate it from nature versus nurture. Like, you can't ever completely decide one or the other, right? Like, I conceptualize myself as gray sexual. However, which, if you haven't heard that term, it's a form of asexuality that basically just means that, like, I'm not completely asexual. Like, I do have some sexual desire and attraction, and but it's not very high at all. Like, it's very low. But I also have had some trauma in that area of my life. So I will never be able to completely separate nature from nurture in that sense. Would I conceptualize myself as gray sexual if I had grown up with a completely healthy relationship to consent and sexual desire, and if no trauma had happened to me, etc., etc.? I'll never know. And I can't separate that. Just like the fact that I would consider myself to have a shopping addiction, that it's something that I struggle with, I'll never be able to separate that shopping addiction from my financial resources in my life, or lack thereof. I'll never be able to separate that from the way that I grew up, valuing the things that I have, creating very deep attachments to the specific objects that I have. That is a direct contributor to why I can't have a large collection of decks. And the psychological motivators behind why I feel the way that I feel, I mean, just because there are motivators doesn't mean you can separate yourself from them. Doesn't, even if you can acknowledge, I have a problem with this thing and here's why, it doesn't mean that it stops existing, like, for example, this specific tarot deck, Tarot of the Cat People, my copy, I can tell you a story about it, was given to me by a family friend. It was one of the things that got me, this was one of a small number of decks that taught me tarot back in 2019. I've had tarot decks since I was a teenager, but this was the one that really kickstarted my journey back into, and is this deck itself special? I do find it to be special, but it is also special because of that story. And I'll never know how special this deck is to me simply because of that story, because of the way that it was acquired, versus how I won't be able to, I'll never be able to objectively experience this tarot deck. And one of the things that happened recently after getting this tarot deck was a friend of mine had expressed interest in it, and I wasn't super attached to it yet, and I gave it to her. And then I almost immediately missed it, and I was like, oh shit, I shouldn't have given her that deck. So I bought myself a copy because, I don't know if it is now. I think it is. I think it's still in print. I bought myself a copy. It was very easy for me to get a hold of it. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't the deck that was given to me. And I talked to her about it, and she was like, oh my God, she was so understanding. And she was like, oh my God, if you need your original copy back, I completely understand. And I felt really bad about, like, you know, the whole exchange of like, can you please give me this deck back because I need this specific deck, even though it's the same as the one that I just bought. It's the same, you know? But she was very understanding. I gave her my newer copy that I had just bought, and she gave me back this one. And it's important to me that I have the one that was given to me. If something happened to this specific deck, I would buy another Tarot of the Cat People to replace it, but I would always be sad if I didn't still have this one. And I know that that's completely irrational, that it doesn't really matter, that, and I've been through, like, I mean, if you've watched more than one or two of my videos, you've probably heard me offhandedly mention, well, I lost that in the tornado, or that was before the tornado, or whatever. I lost a big chunk of my possessions in a tornado in 2011. And so that's enmeshed in all of my relationship to objects as well. Because there were so many things that were personally significant to me that are gone forever. I'll never get them back. And my attachment to those items is it's irrational because they're just objects. But my relationship to objects is also important to me, and it always has been. The fact that I still have that original library card is important to me. Even things that aren't specifically objects. The fact that I have had the same phone number. The first time I got a cell phone, sometime in high school, so it would have been very late 90s, probably 98, 99 is the first time I ever got a cell phone. And my phone number is still the same. And that is important to me. Why is it important to me? Because if you actually look at that objectively, it doesn't fucking matter. That shit doesn't fucking matter. But just because I can tell myself objectively that doesn't matter, it's not going to change the fact that I have the feelings that I have. You know what I mean? I'm not sure exactly what I'm trying to say. But that's just an explanation for me for why I am the way that I am, you know? And my last video, the colors versus collectors video, it was not at all meant to encourage any kind of us versus them mentality. It was supposed to be the opposite. And for the most part, I've gotten like very supportive and insightful comments on that video. And I'm so grateful to that. You know, that video has made me definitively, for now, decide, yeah, I don't want to turn off comments, because if I was turning off comments, I would be missing out on some of the really, really sweet, insightful, smart comments that I've been getting on that video. But I guess I don't know, am I trying to defend my right to be a color? Because that's it for me, is like, until I have, God, just look at this deck, is just so gorgeous. Look at how rich these greens are. And this cat is so beautiful. Anyway, for me personally, whenever I first, it's a weird situation, because it's like the whole purchase process, right? You fall in love with something online, but you can't actually touch it until you buy it and you wait for it to get shipped to you. and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting, and you're already conceptualizing yourself as a person that owns and uses this tarot deck, right? And then you get it in your hands, and it's almost always a different experience than you think it's going to be. I mean, you think that, like, okay, it's just a tarot deck. I know how tarot decks work. I can look at the images in someone's flip through, and I can see. It should be so simple deciding whether or not a tarot deck is going to work for you, because you can see every single image, especially if you're used to working with tarot. You know what types of things are deal breakers for you. If someone is very thorough in their review of a tarot deck, you'll know exactly what the experience of working with the cardstock is going to be like. You can, logically, you can decide exactly it's all there for you. It's all there for you, but it's not the same as holding the object in your hand. So, for me, there is, I don't know how to verbalize it, but like there is something to the energy within an object. And if it does not work for me, it does not work for me. And what I have found is that the longer I work with a tarot deck, the longer I have it, the more a part of me it feels like it becomes. And a part of that is because of the stories we tell ourselves about items, right? Like, this is the gift from my family friend that I associate with the voice of my dead soulmate cat Max. And so this is a story I've been telling myself. And the more I recall that, the more times I tell that to myself, the more enmeshed with how I conceptualize myself, I have made this deck a part of who I am. And that, logically, psychologically, is not healthy. But I'm also not going to stop doing that because it brings me some emotional satisfaction in my life. It brings me joy to have objects that I have had for a long time, that I have cared for. I like having curated collections of things, etc., etc. It brings me joy to interact with objects in this way. And it brings me pride to take care of objects in my life. And this goes all the way back to the beginning for me. I have always had, and it also stems back to control as well. It has always been a priority for me to have control over the things that I surround myself with. Like, it's very important to me that I express myself through my clothing, my jewelry, my perfume, my car that I had to buy after the tornado in a rush. I didn't have time to find something that was really cool or had an interesting color. I just had to get a fucking car, and so it ended up being a boring fucking color. It's silver. And that hurts me to my core that I have a silver car. Who fucking cares, right? But I care because I see it as personal. I see all of the objects that I surround myself with to be a piece of who I am and a portrait of who I am. And that is, on the one hand, it's really not good. It's like, okay, so this is my phone. It's an iPhone. If I were to define myself by the fact that I have an iPhone, then I would be one of those assholes that thinks that you have to choose between Apple and Android, when that shit does not matter. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, whether or not I have this specific tarot deck doesn't matter. But it matters. It matters. I can't change the fact my attachment. I can't change my relationship to objects because it has always been, it goes all the way back not only to like birth or whatever, but also I'm an older sister, and my younger sister at the core of it, she looked up to me, she wanted to be like me, etc. But she stole from me a lot whenever I was... Five of Pentacles. She stole from me. She stole from me a lot when I was younger. She started probably when she was like pre-teenage or something, probably hormonally motivated to a certain extent. So I put a deadbolt on my bedroom door. And she was so sneaky that I would have to lock it even to like go shower in the bathroom, because if I didn't, she'd go in there and she'd take something. So the control that I had to have over my objects in order to keep what I had, and I've always had this sort of like ridiculous disordered relationship with objects. I've always had that. As long as I can remember. And in order to keep control of my objects, I had to deadbolt my bedroom door from a young age, And so you can see a little portrait of my history with objects. And I think a lot of people that might consider themselves, even just people that are collectors, I mean, that's a form of control as well, right? Because maybe your form of control is I have to have all of the things within a certain category. Some people, like, their level of control is I want to be a completist. I want to have all of this type of tarot deck. I want to have all from this artist's work and whatever. But for me personally, it was always about I have such a hyper level of control over the objects in my life that it's to the extent that I think every single individual item in my life needs to represent me, needs to be useful, needs to be beautiful, and that's a lot of pressure. I mean, obviously the objects can't feel the pressure, but that's a lot of pressure to put on objects in your life. But because of that, when I am in full control over the items in my life, I don't feel overstimulated. I feel peaceful and calm in my surroundings. I feel like it's easy for me to just walk over to my tarot shelf and pick out a deck to use. So whenever I can maintain the control that I maybe irrationally feel like I have to have, I feel okay. So it's a coping mechanism, but it's a coping mechanism that works for me. So who am I to say that it's right or wrong? You can't. All you can do is decide what works for you in this life, right? All you can do is figure out what works. And for me, what works is having that control over my environment. For me, if I don't know if this is, again, I feel like I'm really not saying anything, but I wanted to kind of expand on the conversation that was started by Sylvain on his channel, the most recent video that he did, that he titled, I think, My Last Video About Addiction. And he is someone that has dealt with both shopping addiction and addiction to alcohol, and he does see the connection between the two of them. And I do as well, but I haven't had the alcohol addiction aspect. I mean, I'm a drinker for sure, but for the most part, I've been able to control my alcohol intake without needing to give it up, you know what I mean? But you can't really give up shopping. You're always going to need to buy something, right? You can't totally quit. It's like people that have disordered eating. Like, you can't quit food. I mean, maybe you tried and that's what led you to disordered eating. You have to find a way to come back to it and heal your relationship to it. You know, it's not exactly the same as alcohol addiction, because you might be able to completely quit drinking alcohol for the rest of your life. You don't need it to live. But you do, to a certain extent, need to shop to live, and you need to eat to live. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an addictive quality to it. If you have tendencies towards addiction, then that's going to apply to many different aspects of your life. You're going to be trading one for the other. And I have done that myself. You know, anytime I recognize like, oh, okay, I'm buying too many tarot decks. And for me, the reason that it's too many tarot decks is because of my intense relationship to objects. If I feel like I've acquired too many at once, then I can't create those intense relationships. And if I feel like I'm not creating a relationship to the objects I have, then why do I have them? So I let them go. So I can easily get overwhelmed. And what was the point? I was like starting a sentence, and I don't know where that was going. Oh, if I tell myself like, okay, I've been buying too many tarot decks, I've been obsessing too much about tarot, I'm going to quit buying tarot decks for a month or whatever. Then I make a lateral move. I'll start buying a ton of perfume instead. And then I'll tell myself, okay, no more perfume for a while. And then I'll buy a bunch of makeup. You know, like, there's always somewhere I'm gonna go with my shopping problems, right? My shopping addiction. There's always somewhere I'm going to go with it. Like, so much of my life is consumed by my curation of objects in my life. What do I keep? What do I acquire? What do I let go of? How does this fit into my life? How does this fit into my life? And it's exhausting, and it's not, I don't even need to be doing it. Like, it seems like the solution is just, okay, I've got a decent collection of tarot decks at this point, and I've got enough content, like, just in these, so I'm doing my, like, Tarot Throwback 2002 thing right now. Just in that smaller chunk of my collection, I have Cosmic Tribe, which has this giant paperback guidebook. I have Tantric Dakini, also giant paperback guidebook. I've got Tarot of the Cat People, which has this little book that has, like, you know, a total introduction to the world of the outer regions, which is where the cat people live, and it's, like, very thorough, like, world building going on in that guidebook. I've also got Voyager Tarot, which has a giant chunk of a book. You know, I have all of these, the point of me describing that is that I have all of these objects that but that have the opportunity to really spend some time getting to know these particular objects. I don't need to have any more in my life, right? So it seems like if I create such an intense relationship to objects, and I also already have a lot, then why am I seeking more? Why am I always seeking more? And I'm about to head into, and I know this is a personal trigger for me, I'm about to head into, like, the beginning of October is my birthday. I'm going to be 40. So it's a milestone birthday. And I'm going to be receiving, gift cards, money, etc. I'm going to have more resources for a minute. And my last birthday, I really overwhelmed myself. I bought a bunch of tarot decks at once, and it caused me distress. So, what am I saying? I'm not saying anything. Except, I would love to be able to I don't know even how to do this, but I would love to be able to maintain my pride that I have for the aspect of myself that is someone that takes care of my things. I take care of the things that I have in my life so that they can remain useful for as long as I find them to be useful. I would like to keep that pride without defining myself by my things. Like, this deck is important to me. It's one of my top 5. It feels spiritually significant to me, and it's important to me. And it is important to me, it's a priority to me to keep it safe. But some things are out of my control. There may be a day when it gets lost. It gets, maybe I take it with me on a trip and my luggage gets lost. Or, there might be a situation that is completely out of my control at some point that leads me to not having this deck anymore. And it's not that devastating of a thing, right? It's an object that is mass produced. I can get it again. But something struck me. I was watching a video on YouTube, and it was an interview. And, like, the specifics don't really matter in this case, but the interviewer was talking about, oh my god, I just lost the thread. I keep doing that. I'm like kind of sick right now. I think I have like a cold or something. What was it that she said that it was so interesting? Hold on, let me think. Oh my god, I just lost it. I just completely lost it. What did she say? What was I just talking about? Relationship to objects. Defining yourself by the objects in your life. Oh man, I lost it. I completely lost it. Damn it. I was like, that's going to be a cool point, and I can end on that point. I totally forgot. Damn it. That sucks. Oh man. Oh man. But, I mean, okay. So, how do we stop defining ourselves by the things that are in our life? Okay, she was talking about restriction. Okay, yeah, that was what I was thinking. Ugh, okay, that took me like way too long to recover that. But she was talking about restriction, and and how she had recently recovered from some disordered eating that she had developed later in life, like at age 40. And she was talking about how she was able to trace it back to she has always restricted herself. Always. Like, and the more she loves a thing, the less she uses it. And that resonated with me to a certain extent. It was like this, and it always breaks my heart when I see other people going through this. When I see other people doing something like, you know, saying, this is my favorite perfume of all time, and I'm afraid I'll never be able to get it again. Therefore, I bought 7 backups of it, and I never wear it because I'm afraid I'm going to run out. And so we end up doing that sort of scarcity mindset thing, I guess. We end up doing that sometimes with tarot decks as well. Like, we want it more if it's out of print. And then, for me personally, if I really, really want something that is out of print and I do something like spend too much money on it to get it, if I don't use it very much, I feel guilty for having it because there are other people that want it. So I will get rid of it sometimes prematurely because it's like, well, this thing is out of print and I haven't been using it lately and I don't deserve to have it then, so I shall let it go. Or, you know, people that won't get out and use their out of print decks simply because they're afraid they won't shuffle them. They'll be like, this deck is too precious and I can't shuffle it. And that hurts me to see that. Like, because in my mind, it's like these things were created to be used. And obviously, like, I can't, like, this is not me making a judgment on someone else, but it hurts me personally because I think that things should be used. But what resonated with me is that mindset of, like, I've had that happen too because I'm into Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab, their perfume company, and they do a lot of, like, they're constantly putting out new perfumes, constantly. And usually they're just like these little limited releases. You know, they have things that are always a part of their general catalog, but for the most part, like, you know, seasonally they'll come out with, like, they come out with a huge collection of perfume every Halloween, you know, and those perfumes will be available for like 4 to 6 months, and then they take them down from the site. And those particular perfumes, sometimes they re-release them if they were really popular, you know, whatever. But for the most part, they don't come back. So if you fall in love with something, you know, you kind of want to just like buy a whole bunch of backups. And then I recently spilled a bottle of perfume. That was one of my very favorites. And I only had the one bottle, and it was from a Halloween collection. And I had the opportunity to get more. And so it was like, how many bottles should I get? Because I just experienced spilling an entire bottle of this perfume. I just experienced losing something that is valuable to me. So how much, you know, what are the terms in that case? Like, you know, but because of that sort of mindset of like scarcity, we end up doing things like, okay, for example, like my intense relationship to objects is so specific that like I will, like yesterday I was at a bookstore in town, and they have like pop figures and stuff, and I was looking through them because there's a couple of specific ones I'm looking for right now. They didn't have either of them, but I was looking through all of them, and it just suddenly struck me, and it made me so sad. Which is stupid, again, like objectively this shit doesn't matter, but it made me so sad when I was looking at them because I was thinking, how many of these little mass-produced toys in boxes, how many of them will be bought by someone who's afraid to take it out of the box, and they just hold on to it for decades, and then they sell it on eBay, and maybe that person continues the trend of not taking it out of the box, and for some reason that like hurts me to my core. Like, I have a friend a coworker and friend, who she specifically buys Barbies on eBay so that she can liberate them from the boxes. I mean, she doesn't buy like them just to do that. She buys them because she wants them, but she takes pleasure in liberating them from the boxes that they've been in since like the 70s or the 80s or whatever. And you know, it's heartbreaking to me to see that we have so much abundance, so much excess in our capitalist consumerist culture that like, but we still have the mindset that this stuff is precious, you know? I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's like, there's something that's mass produced, you know, like a tarot deck, mass produced. Like there's thousands of these decks out there, right? This is not a precious thing. It's precious to me, but if I were to treat it like it was, its value was only in whether or not it could be resellable to someone else in the future, then I would be afraid to use it. I would be afraid to take it out of the box. When I got it, it was still in the wrapping. It had been in the wrapping since 1984, you know? And that's heartbreaking to me, that it was spending all that time not fulfilling its purpose in life. But I am attaching emotional and psychological feelings onto objects, you know? So that's, I don't have a point, but as per usual, I don't have a point, but it's just, it's fascinating to me how we all deal with our objects. But I have an emotional connection to my own way of having a relationship to the objects in my life. So it's important for me to recognize whenever I'm having a particular feeling about that it's how I'm engaging with that. It's not, you know, this sort of tendency to police each other, right? Like, you might be the type of person that wants to buy a backup of your favorite things and keep them in the wrapping, and like, that's totally within your rights to do that kind of thing. And maybe it hurts you to see someone taking a valuable thing out of its box and shuffling it. Maybe it seems like a completely sacrilegious to like alter a tarot deck that is historic and is valued by other people. Or maybe you know, we all have our different, we all in this tarot society obviously have what might be considered a disordered relationship with objects, because we are using objects as spiritual tools. So most likely we're creating an attachment to those objects because that's what we were taught to do since we were born in this consumerist capitalist society. We were taught to define ourselves by the objects that we have. So we'll never be able to separate it, you know? Because we choose an iPhone over an Android, maybe we feel a connection to an iPhone because we like Pepsi more than Coke. It's like these binary choices that we've been presented with since birth don't really mean anything, but they mean a lot at the same time. And so like separating that is just, it's too enmeshed. We're never going to be able to separate it. We're all dealing with capitalism and shopping, and we're dealing with all of this in our own personal way, right? Which is why, to me, it's so fascinating when I feel like I've seen someone get past it. You know, it's like seeing someone successfully quit drinking that had an issue. Like, it's fascinating to me to see someone that has that's why we're attracted to those culling videos, right? Because it's like we're fascinated to see that someone has overcome that, even though they haven't necessarily overcome it. Because I know for me personally, I definitely fall into compulsive culling, and others as well. Like you've seen people do that whole thing where they get rid of all but like one tarot deck and then they regret it pretty immediately. Or sometimes maybe they don't. Sometimes it was just like whatever it was that was leading them to collecting tarot was actually just really bad for them, and they actually did move past that, and they decided that tarot in general is not for them, and they move on with their lives, and that's fine. But there's also just the compulsory need to control everything in our environment, right? Like how many of us in our tarot society how many of us have addiction problems? A lot of us. How many of us have issues with OCD? Probably a lot of us. And again, that's not to say that like we have all these problems that need to be addressed. We're just sitting around playing with tarot cards instead of like digging into our psyches and figuring out what we need to figure out. I mean, that's true for a lot of us too, but it's a part of what we're all going through, right? And we could choose to sit down and talk to each other about it and listen to each other and find ways to connect with each other and ask those deeper questions. Like if we say we're interested in shadow work, then maybe we should start lifting up those rocks and looking at what's underneath, Start naming those skittering things that are underneath the rocks and bring them to light. It would be interesting and helpful for us to do it, and that is only going to happen if we listen to each other. That's only going to happen if we have compassion for each other. It's only going to happen if we explore what it might feel like to have a different viewpoint. And it's not going to happen by, self-righteous screaming at each other about, like just because I have pride in the fact that I take care of things in my life, I take care of them, I use them, and I take care of them. And I will hopefully still have this same exact tarot deck 30 years from now. And I will be proud of the fact that I took care of this thing. But I can also recognize that that's a place of privilege, that I could just as easily get this thing stolen from me or drop it in the tub or whatever. And that doesn't mean that I haven't taken care of it. It's an object. Objects are impermanent, just like everything else, Anyway, I could just sit here and like talk about nothing. But yeah. I don't know. I don't want to ever perpetuate any kind of us and them mentality, because life is not binary. Life is not colors and collectors. I mean, I'm both. I have a curated collection of tarot and oracle decks. I have things that work for me, and when they stop working for me, I cull them. And I take some real pleasure in culling things. It is a high in and of itself, right? So, there's disordered thinking and psychological attachment, and everything is subjective. There's disordered thinking at every step of the way, in my own process, in other people's processes, or maybe disordered thinking is the wrong way to put that. But like I was saying in my last video, like every single aspect of our lives is psychologically motivated, and there's going to be traumas that are influencing that. Familial relationships, the way that things were modeled, behaviors were modeled to us as we were growing up. And there's so many different reasons for why we do what we do. And none of us can separate nature from nurture. And some of these things make us who we are, and some of these things are ways that we are behaviors that we need to push back against and try to move on from and try to heal from. And some of these things are things that we're not ready to heal from yet. And, you know, everybody is on a different piece of their path, and everybody's coming from a different perspective. And it breaks my heart to know that there are people that would make that would belittle someone else's experience, whether that be mine, whether that be anyone else's. If you're not getting something out of a video, click off of it. If you're not, there's no need for, like, telling other people how they need to feel. Ever. And it's so hard to keep putting yourself out there when you know that those people are always there. Those people are always lurking. Those people are always ready to tell you some shit, you know, always ready to let you know that you're doing it wrong. There's always those people. And I don't ever want to come off as one of those people. And I also don't want to engage with those people anymore. Anyway, not to end it on a bad note, let's just pick a card and we'll end it on that. I just want to say that Sylvain's video was so beautiful. I mean, he knows this. I've told him. I've told him. This is him giving us some soup. This is Sylvain giving us all soup that we desperately need. You know, like, it was so valuable to me to hear it conceptualized in that way. To hear from the perspective of someone that has been through addiction in more ways than one and is able to say, hey, we need to support each other, you know? Just because somebody shows up and says, oh my God, I have a problem, I have culled my tarot deck collection to 3 decks and I feel really comfortable with that right now, just because they relapse in the future, which is, it's gonna happen, you know, doesn't mean that they have, you know, it's like we want to laugh at each other. Like we think that, like, anytime one of us makes a video speaking about our experiences, it's like, this is the definitive way that I am now. I have made these decisions and now I am done. No, we're sharing a little chunk of our path and we're conceptualizing it and looking inward about it as we go. Like, we're a very self-reflective corner of YouTube, right? Terra Society, we want to look at our psychological issues. We want to grow. We want to become better. We are into self-improvement and all of that stuff, which means we're constantly moving towards being more self-aware, more self-actualized. We're constantly moving somewhere on that path. We're not done. What I'm thinking right now as I'm sitting in my little tarot closet is different from what I'm going to be thinking tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. And if you look back at my channel, like what I was saying 6 years ago, I have changed so much since then, you know? We have to let ourselves grow and evolve and be kind to each other in the process, you know? Recognize that when someone is saying something that really pushes back against something in you, there's a reason for that. And only you know what that reason is. And anyway, okay, I feel like, again, I haven't said anything, but I'm here, I'm trying to process things, and I hopefully, at least for now, I am still able to make some of those processes, I'm able to verbalize them and share them, at least for now. So I'm going to keep doing it for as long as I can handle it. So, thanks for being here.